All right. Well, let's hit the ground running. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So, before we get into your good work as the leadership fanatic, I want to know this. 6 years ago, especially now with March 13th, the pandemic was beginning, it was getting ready to rage. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you do things today?
Believe it or not, that's actually a funny story. When the pandemic started to come down and it became clear, as a matter of fact, the Sunday before we went into lockdown, I ran a half marathon in Central Park. And I'm like, thank God I didn't catch anything on the train and all that good stuff.
Yeah,
But in terms of getting through it, I just decided that I was not going to worry.
yeah,
Um, I I was like, look, I can only do what I can do. I can only control what I can control, and I am going to trust that God is going to remember that I am here, and we're just gonna make this work. And ironically, it I plowed through, and it wasn't the worst time in my life, believe it or not.
yeah.
So literally, it was this commitment to not give in to the waves of anxiety, and particularly as a small business owner, I'm just worrying about how that was going to affect a lot of my work because up until then, not only do I do the work that I do in terms of consulting and coaching, but I do a lot of facilitating. And up until then, all of it was in person, all of it.
Yeah.
And so to go from that into trying to figure out how to pivot to create a persona, if you will, in terms of how I present virtually, getting comfortable with the virtual format. I am the queen of the whiteboard, and now you tell me I got to talk on Zoom? What? But yeah, it was frankly just a mental mindset shift. And then what made it an even more interesting time, I don't know if you recall, but early in the pandemic, at least I think it was early in the pandemic, I don't remember the timing exactly, when George Floyd was killed.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that was actually helpful in a publicity perspective. I did a panel interview for with Forbes, and we were talking about diversity as professionals. And Mylena is Mylena no matter where she is, no matter who she's with. And I said, I think this uptick in commitment to diversity and people of color, I said, I think this is a now issue. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think the commitment is truly there. But the reason that I bring that up is because as a result of some of the things that I said, several clients came my way. I'm not sure if they were trying to prove my perspective wrong, but it also helped a bit. But yeah, that's how I got through it.
So let's get into what you do on a daily basis and to synthesize what you do. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-old kids. It's career day, and one of them wants to know what you do for a living. How do you make it make sense to their brains?
Ah, that's good. And you said 13-year-old kid. So the way I would describe it, I would almost talk about how they relate to their parents. So if mom and dad say that we're going to do X, mom and dad are then trying to make sure every part of your family life is set up so that it supports getting to X as a family. And when I see things, or when mom and dad see things that contradict or undermine our ability to get to X, we've got to have a conversation about it. There's some reining in, there's potentially some discipline about that. And I do that for individuals, whether they're seeking me out for personal coaching or leaders in their teams. Part of where we get a lot of conflict within ourselves as well as with the people we work with is when we have a lot of contradictions. We say we're moving in this direction, but all of our habits, tasks, they kind of go this way over there. And so, what I do, I help people be honest about the contradictions between their goals and what they actually do. And I help them deal with the distress of navigating what I call new terms of agreement with the world around them and the relationships they have. Just because you decide that you're going to shift gears to pursue a goal, it doesn't mean that the people in your life won't be affected. And as a result of that, you've got to figure out how to navigate that. But just because they will be affected, it doesn't mean that you choose not to pursue a particular goal. Sometimes we have to figure out how to navigate that uneasy space about getting aligned. And essentially, I help people really work that out. And I help people be honest with themselves about those contradictions. And one story that I would share actually, growing up, I grew up with my grandparents. I would miss the school bus every single day because I knew grandpa would take me to school. We would stop by McDonald's. And at some point, my grandmother and grandfather ganged up on me. They got aligned one day while I was at school. My grandma was like, I'm trying to teach her to be responsible and to be on time. Not only do you get up and take her to school, but you reward her with McDonald's. She's now doesn't even try to get ready on time because and so it's that kind of thing, working out those contradictions and
Yeah.
helping people figure out how to get to where they want to go, even if it's a little uncomfortable.
So, what did you want to be when you were a kid? When you were that age, what was your dream gig?
This, you wouldn't believe this. I want to be a psychiatrist.
Okay.
I'd read a book called Sybil,
Uh-huh.
and it was about a woman who had multiple personalities.
Yeah.
And as I remember, I was about 11 years old. My grandmother let me read content. Now that I'm older, I'm thinking maybe I was a little too adult. But this woman, she sustained all sorts of abuse. And I still believe, with my unscientific background, that much of what she sustained was an extreme emotional reaction to the abuse she endured. And I just thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to help people manage these very difficult feelings they have so that they don't take over their lives, so that they can still function? Because this lady, literally, if you'd read the book, if she was sad, it was like everything about her went to 10. If she was happy, everything shifted the other way. And I just wanted to do that for a while. And then college chemistry came.
So what were the foundational seeds growing up with your grandparents that were implanted into you, and even early on with them and other examples around you that made you want to help people figure out leadership, getting into psychology, these things that are kind of somewhat left brain? What were the seeds planted?
My grandmother was not formally educated, but my grandmother was smart. Um, and I think what really pushed me into trying to study and understand people, to try to understand what motivates them, I watched how she navigated the world. My grandmother was a young woman. She was diagnosed with cancer. It's amazing that she could be my grandmother. They didn't think she was going to live that long. But it was little things that she would do in terms of really pushing me to pay attention to people. So one of my first work experiences, she managed a dry cleaners. And on Saturdays, she didn't care that I didn't want to go to work with her. She absolutely did not care. And one particular Saturday, I think I was around 14 or 15, there was a lady who was there at 7 a.m. when we arrived. And um, the lady was chatting with me, and I was chatting her. We went back and forth. And when the lady left, my grandma said, "Come here, sweetheart, let's talk about something." And I was like, "Oh God, what did I do now?" She said, "You're not in trouble." She said, "But I want to point out something to you." She said, "We open at 7. That lady was here at 7. Did you notice when you gave her her clothes that she stood between the counter and the door and she kept looking toward her car?" She said, "The only reason she didn't cut you off is because you are a child. I want you to start to pay attention to what's going on around you so that you can think about how the world is operating, how people are operating." And I had lots of experiences like that. My grandmother was teaching me emotional intelligence before I realized that a term existed for it.
Yeah.
It started off with things like, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Um, and that was how my grandmother taught me to navigate the world. And I think, on the other hand, with my grandfather was this other thing in leadership that I think is interesting. We have a goal, we're also trying to get to a particular place. But my granddaddy represented a kind of safety that I think made the tension between he and my grandmother actually work well for teaching me. My grandmother was all about lessons. I don't want your life to be hard. You need to learn certain things. And my grandfather was the person you went to. It's like, I messed that up. And I know grandma loves me, but granddaddy is a little bit softer sometimes. And I think if you think about leadership, I think where leaders sometimes miss certain opportunities to connect with people on the team, you've got to find a way to push people, to compel them to move in a particular direction. But you also have to have the ability to assure them, reassure them, make it safe for them to take risks and mistakes. Those things go together. And I think beautifully, my grandparents' relationship allowed me to have that, just in two different bodies.
So, other than your grandparents, you know, getting into leadership means that you've seen examples of it that's been effective in your life.
Mhm.
What were examples of leadership, whether it was in a political realm, a social realm, culture? What were you seeing that like built that pedestal of all of that in your mind?
In terms of things that I've seen, I'll talk about the community that I'm from quite a bit. Um, what I recognized in hindsight, and I often talk about this quite a bit, when I look at the people who contributed to who I am in terms of my character development, as all in addition to how I approach the world, the one thing that was clear consistently, they really had a tremendous sense of compassion and love for people. I often say if you don't really care about the people you're leading, and if you're not truly vested in the mission you're working on, you can't lead those people. That disingenuous quality rank comes through. And what I found was that the people in my family, my community, they were willing to do what needed to be done. We didn't have a lot of discussions about whose fault was a particular thing when a need needed to be met. Now, granted, we would talk about perhaps how to prevent certain things from happening again, that kind of thing, but it was this approach to addressing situations that needed to be addressed and not getting bogged down in the blame shifting that I think sometimes undermines productivity in organizations. As a matter of fact, one of the things I think about in particular, my grandmother's best friend, her name was Donna. Donna was a dean at a community college in town. And when I got ready for my first job interview, Donna made a point to come to the house. She made sure, I mean, granted, I was way overdressed for an interview at Burger King, but it was this whole idea that we are contributing to the work ethic and the growth and development of this young person who's one day going to go off into the world. And we need to start to build that standard in terms of how she presents herself now. I think about the associate pastor in my church. He just died about 6 months ago. He recognized that, but when I got to high school, my grandparents had separated and divorced, and it was something as simple as there was something I wanted, my senior pictures. My grandmother had a lot of health problems. I was working, but I didn't want to ask my grandmother to help me pay for the pictures. And what he did, he said, I see you know, these proofs and your grandmother showed them to me. And I'm going to help you pay for these pictures. And I think what happens in terms of the way that I was reared that really makes me who I am today. I was raised in an environment where we really do care about one another. We don't necessarily see it as we need to save you from every challenge or struggle in life, but we're also not looking to make your life harder or make it worse or to constantly point out where you screwed up, where you went wrong. And I think sometimes leadership has to balance this notion between getting the work done, achieving the objective, as well as letting the people who you are leading, who you are in community with, know that there is space for them to be fallible. And I think a lot of times we don't do that well. And I think the way that I grew up, I was fortunate that I got an opportunity to be blessed by people who really manage that well.
It's interesting you say it that way because I think about my history of being around, supervisors or bosses, and there is that fine line between letting you do whatever you want to do and being overbearing and finding that middle ground where
Hmm.
you have that confidence that you can be autonomous, but you
Hmm.
also will get advice and you will get things that will help you be better at what you do along the way. It's a delicate balance.
I think so too. As a matter of fact, one of the things I think about on the flip side, one of my early bosses after grad school, with all due respect to her, I hate to say this, I thought she was a horrible boss. Because you talk about overbearing. This boss kind of, you ever hear this expression, sink or swim? I felt
Yeah.
like she threw me out in the water, and just abandoned me. And I had the kind of title that if you hired somebody with the experience level that I had right out of grad school, you need to have a commitment to their growth and development. And to this day, I wonder why she hired me and then abandoned me. I wonder if there was something political going on behind the scenes that I was unaware of. Because I also think one of the failures of leadership is to abandon the part of your job as a leader to develop and invest in the people who work with and for you. I think when you don't do that as a leader, I think you have no right to expect more than a bare minimum level of productivity. And I think a lot of times that's where leaders also struggle. There is a place between overbearing and giving people freedom. And then what also happens is that we do need direction. People do need some understanding of what matters on this team, what success looks like. Where are we going? I understand the perfunctory things that we have to do in terms of operations, but what's the end goal here? is it that we're trying to do? And I think leaders can sometimes swing too far in the other direction because leadership, we sometimes see, and I've heard people characterize it as, I don't have time for all of these meetings. Leadership is talking. It's connecting. It's people. I said one thing that a leader ought to think of themselves as the chief repeating officer. You're going to deliver whatever your message is multiple times in multiple spaces. And if you really care about the people that you lead, you will think about whether or not you need to tweak how you deliver it so that it lands for them. It's like giving a speech. You can have the world's greatest vocabulary, but if it doesn't connect well, goes over people's heads, you were just talking for nothing. And I think what happens with leaders, we've really got to get to a point where we have a goal that we're advancing toward, but we've also got to find a way to take the people on our teams with us.
So, if you could have a dream guest on the Leadership Drives podcast, anybody on the planet that you could sit down with and talk to, let's put this out in the universe. Who do you want to talk to?
Oh, oh God, that is so hard. Um, that is tough. I would say my shiro, believe it or not, is Fannie Lou Hamer.
Okay.
Believe it or not, it took a long road trip, and I sure did go down to Rulesville, Mississippi to find her gravesite. I sure did. Um, And the reason I like people like Fannie Lou Hamer, they're very flat-footed. One of the things that I kind of have a push-pull relationship with, particularly with corporate America, I think there is this code switching that people do. And I don't mean just Black people. I mean, think about the things that we tend to say about how corporate America requires everybody to be a little less than authentic, some people more than others, but you're not able to be as direct as you'd like to be. You aren't able to be as clear as you'd like to be oftentimes. You're playing a political game many times. And what I love about Fannie Lou Hamer and everything, as a matter of fact, I'm reading a biography that someone wrote about her life right now. I love the fact that she was very simple. She was very clear. She understood the agenda, or as we say, we understood the mission. She understood it. And she was able to communicate it to people in a way that you couldn't deny that she was passionate about it. She made some god awful sacrifices in that work. I just finished a chapter in the book where she and some other young people with the Student Nonviolence Coalition were brutally attacked. And what I love about people like her, she's able to say what she has to say. Um, she's able to work in humor into how she presents and how she speaks. Um, and she's just clear about what it is. She is flexible yet uncompromising at the same time. And I tend to find that I love people like that. You say what you mean what you say, and you do the work to actually get there, even when it's inconvenient. And as I say that about Fannie Lou Hamer, the kinds of people who I like to talk to on my podcast are people who do the work of reconciling who they are today, the challenges, the mistakes they've made in the past, and they're even looking for what I call character alignment. I see how these habits, these behaviors don't serve me, don't serve the people that I work with or the goal that I'm trying to get. And so as I'm evolving as a person, I am going to acknowledge those shortcomings, but I'm also going to be laser focused on where I have to go. And I'm trying to work all of me into one dose, so to speak, so that I don't have this disjointed existence and I don't live my life through the lens of just never ending contradiction. I love people with that kind of character. Those are the kinds of people I tend to
Yeah.
enjoy talking to.
So, when you look back on your career, the one thing about our professional lives is that it requires risk.
Mhm.
What's the biggest risk that you've taken in your career up to this point?
Well, that's easy. Entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Very much so. And simply because there were a couple things I knew when I started. I knew I didn't know how to run a business. I knew that. I was not delusional about that at all. But what also made it risky is that in terms of a financial safety net, I knew I didn't have one. And so what I thought about and what gave me actually the motivation to take the leap was the fact that I didn't have children. Because I said, it's one thing when somebody is calling you mama and they need to go to Little League practice to take risks with your life. And it's another thing not to have that and take risks. I will do it now because I want to give, and I was 30 years old when I started. And I decided at that point, I'm going to give my best years to myself. If my business doesn't work, so what if I have to go back to work when I'm like 50 years old? Why would I invest the best of who I am, my most energetic years, my highest levels of creativity into organizations where I won't be treated well, where I won't be respected, where I feel as if I have to code switch and morph into somebody else to just be on the team? Why would I give them that? And frankly, what we see oftentimes in the way that our organizations operate, there is no longer mutual loyalty and mutual accountability. So for me, the greatest risk was deciding, you know what? I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to figure it out. And thankfully, if I fall, there's no one who's going to fall with me. And thankfully, I have the kind of family that I have. If it gets really bad, I can go home.
Yeah. So, what is the energy for you every day to do this at a high level? To be effective, to change lives, take care of your soul, all of these things when the alarm clock goes off. What gets you going?
When I work with teams and leaders, what first and foremost, let me say this. I believe that as a leader, it is your obligation to create spaces where people don't feel oppressed coming to work. If your team is crying or cussing in the car on their way to work, something is wrong. And as a leader, it's your job to try to fix that. What I actually enjoy, what gets me going, a lot of times when I'm working with organizations, I can say the thing that the people on the team can't say. They may have thought it, sometimes they may have even told me that, but because I'm an outsider, I don't have the same kind of difficulty saying the hard things. Now, granted, I go out of my way to be diplomatic and thoughtful in terms of delivery, but I get to be the person who referees conversations oftentimes that these organizations and teams cannot have without me. And my hope and my goal is to make it safer for those people to actually go to work. And by safer, I'm talking about psychological safety. I can go to work and tap dance a little less, frankly. And on the other hand, even when I'm working with people through individual coaching, what I often see, whether somebody is working on a personal development issue or leadership issue, so many people go through life worrying about what they say, so to speak. And by they, whether it's your boss or your cousin, so many people live these lives where they are really aiming to perform for other people. And I think that for me to help people get free of that and ask themselves, are you less than authentic, particularly when it's with family, because you really love them, because you really don't mind, or are you afraid that if you were to be who you really are, that you will alienate them and therefore they will cut you off somehow? Let's talk about this because in these coaching sessions that we have, you sound pretty resentful about all of this, what you refer to as a burden and these unfair expectations. And I find with the work that I do, I help people give voice to that. And if we're in a team setting, I help them have those difficult conversations because I think you can't work on a compelling goal and then do the alignment work until you deal with the reality that's before you.
So, if you had a dream tonight, ran into that young version of you that wanted to get into psychiatry, and you walked up to her, and there was a film projector, and you hit play, and it was a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived, would that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
She would.
Okay.
She would say, great pivot since you didn't like chemistry. Great pivot. But I actually do think that what I do now is as close to that work as I could possibly get without doing that work. I get to talk to people, I get to study their behavior, I get to get them to be introspective. I get to contemplate how do we get people to move past, particularly when it is with conflict, how do I get people to move past that fight or flight, I need to protect myself mode to being present so we can work on a solution as opposed to you just being stuck in whatever space you are when you're ticked off and you're upset. I think that 11-year-old girl, she'd be like, good job, good job.
Absolutely. So, of everything that you've done, accomplished, overcome, and become, what are you the proudest of?
You wouldn't believe this. I love what I do professionally. What I am proudest of is what I do with my free time and the money that I make. The Leadership Drives podcast, I it's more of a mobile podcast than a traditional mic, even though my shows are all audio only. What I do when I do these podcast episodes, I travel via road trip. I love to drive. That was also something important to me by my grandparents. We were the
Yeah.
kings and queens of road trips. I go and I meet my podcast guests in person. And I talk to them about two things. I want to know, on one hand, what drives them to lead. And then I want to talk to them about how they live. And what I'm most proud of is my willingness to travel the country by myself. Actually, when people have asked, can I go? The answer is no. Because frankly, when I set out, I just know I need to be home in 6 weeks, not necessarily when you want to come back. But as I've learned so much about people and the country. And when I think about some of the things that people have shared with me, it gives me fuel for continuing to do the work that it takes to live life on my own terms. There was a woman who I interviewed. She was a bishop's wife in the AME church, and she was also a former hospice chaplain. And some of the things that we talked about, look, live your life while you can live. Don't waste your time and energy on things that are really insignificant to you simply because you feel like those are the things you are supposed to do. There's another woman I met, and she talked about how she runs a plantation right outside. White woman, actually, from I think South Carolina, moved to the upper Midwest, and now she's in New Orleans. And she talked about how she chose her career because she grew up in an environment where they couldn't talk about the elephant in the room when it came to like the social context of their community, our culture as an American society, and just the passion it takes to literally move around the world to chase her dream. I talk to people who do all sorts of things, and it is probably the greatest education about people.
Yeah.
And it's also the thing that keeps my own fire aflame to go, you know what? Even if I mess up, even if something doesn't go perfectly, I know there's a whole band of people out here who are on similar journeys trying to live the lives that they have designed for themselves instead of simply committing to routine or, as I say, taking prescriptions that were written for other people.
So everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, Good question. I try to present in terms of my demeanor what I refer to as a comfortably elegant approach to living. I want to make people feel safe. I want people to feel comfortable engaging me. I want to present in such a way where I am elegant without being pretentious. Um, I also, in a professional perspective, I like my clients not to feel as if I'm there to compete with them. My goal is to help you identify the challenges you're having on your team and help you create solutions that are sustainable. So I often say that I'm the approachable expert. I want people to feel comfortable, and the personal value terms that I've chosen to guide my life. It's a cross between integrity and then what I refer to as faith. And for me, what integrity is, it's really alignment. It's about reconciling the parts of my life that have contradictions. If I don't like green over here, I don't like green anywhere. And when there are exceptions, I do the interpersonal work to figure out why is it that you like green in this one space, but you hate it anywhere else. It's the same thing with my faith. There are certain parts about my faith practice that I'm just like, I don't know if I think God intended that. And then it makes me ask myself, am I actually rejecting that part of my faith practice because there's something I simply want to do and that creates a hiccup for me? Like, what is my motivation? Is it just I want to do what I want to do, or I don't like the boundaries of what this particular tenant says I have to do? And so the part of that for me, that integrity piece is really big. And then the other part, faith, what saves me from a tremendous amount of anxiety and perfectionism is that I do believe I'm going to show up every day in a way that I'm trying to do my best. And once I've done that, that's all I can do. And I am going to just do my best. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to have as much foresight as possible. Um, but ultimately, I'm going to live a life of faith and integrity. I'm going to trust God to pick up the pieces when I drop them. And I am going to live a life that allows me to be as authentic as possible, even when other people don't approve.
I love it. So anybody that wants to dive in more, you've made it really easy. It's yourname.com.
Yep, MylenaSutton.com.
I will put that in the show notes. This has been absolutely wonderful. I love your fire. I love your energy. Thank you so much for taking a minute out and putting your story out there. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed my time with you too.
Thank you. All right.